Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Uh, Welcome all children. You all have this. Raise it. Okay. And now please keep it in the silent mode for 1 hour. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, good evening. Now, Professor Atish Dabolkar, Professor Jairam Chenglur, our Director TIFR, Professor Arnav Bhattacharya, Director HBCSC, and all the esteemed guests. Welcome to TIFR. We welcome all the online guests also. This is getting live stream. So, online guests from all over the world, and they are all already joining us on this. So I hope that you are all wonderful time. Those who are here, you have seen so many several wonders of science, and now we come to the pinnacle of these events, which is the lecture by a very distinguished, world-renowned scientist. So this also happens to be a centennial year of Professor Abdul Salam at ICTP, and ICTP has been organizing such lectures all over the world. So welcome all the people of the world, those who are actually watching this online for Professor Atish Dabolkar. So before we start, I request our director, Professor Jairam Chenglur, and please accompany our distinguished guests on the stage, please. Yeah, please. Thank you, Professor Chenglur. Now I request you to say a few words or to welcome.
Thank you, Professor Prabhu, and welcome everybody to TIFR. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this special lecture organized by the TIFR Alumni Association on the occasion of the National Science Day. This is the 25th talk in the series, and it's very heartening to see how this tradition has grown into a vibrant platform for sharing ideas and celebrating science. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Professor Atish Dabolkar back to TIFR. We will shortly have a formal introduction for Professor Dabolkar, but I would like to take this opportunity to thank him for making the time to visit us and for agreeing to give this lecture. Thank you. The TIFR Alumni Association has been instrumental in supporting TIFR's strong outreach program and engagement with the public. Through activities like today's lecture, the association has helped bridge the gap between the scientific community and the wider public, ensuring that science remains accessible, engaging, and relevant. On behalf of TIFR, I extend my gratitude to the Alumni Association for their continued commitment to taking TIFR's mission forward. Thank you and welcome again.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Chenglur. And now I request our director, Professor Chenglur, to felicitate Professor Atish Dabolkar on the behalf of TAA. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Professor Chenglur. Yeah, please sit. I'll introduce you. Atish has been our close door neighbor for so many years. So let me begin. Respected colleagues, distinguished alumni, and dear friends, it's a privilege to stand before you today on the occasion of this National Science Day. It is celebrated in India on 28th February every year to the discovery of Raman effect by the Indian physicist Sir C.V. Raman on 20th February 1928. To honor this achievement and to promote scientific awareness, the government of India declared 28th February as a National Science Day in 1986. The day highlights the importance of science and encourages scientific thinking among students and citizens. Then this year's gathering is particularly special as it makes the 25th lecture in this series organized by TIFR Alumni Association. a testament to the enduring commitment of this community to nurture scientific thought and dialogue. It is also fitting that the topic of today's talk is scientific temper in the age of unreason. Now, today we are honored to have Professor Atish Dabolkar, a scientist whose journey exemplifies the very essence of curiosity and perseverance. Professor Dabolkar began his academic career at IIT Kanpur, where he earned his master's degree in physics before pursuing his PhD in theoretical physics at Princeton University in 1990. His postdoctoral years took him to Rutgers University, Harvard University, and the California Institute of Technology, where he deepened his engagement with some of the most profound questions in theoretical physics. And in 1996, he returned to India to join the Department of Theoretical Physics at TIFR, reaffirming his commitment to advancing science in his homeland. Now, his career has since spanned continents and institutions, culminating in his appointment as a director of the Abdus Salam Center for Theoretical Physics, ICTP in Trieste, in 2019. And along the way, he also played a pivotal role in organizing Strings 2001 at TIFR Mumbai. The first time this prestigious conference was held outside the USA or Europe, together with Professors Prasventa Vadia and Sunil Mukhi. This landmark event placed India firmly on the global map of string theory research. Professor Dabolkar's scientific contributions are profound. He identified a spectrum of supersymmetric states, now famously known as Dabolkar-Harvey states, which opened new avenues in the study of string theory. His pioneering work has been central to the discovery of duality symmetries and has significantly advanced our understanding of the quantum entropy of black holes. So these insights continue to inspire physicists worldwide. His achievements have been recognized with numerous honors, including the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, Fellowship of the Indian Academy of Sciences, the National Leadership Award from the President of India, and election as a Fellow of the World Academy of Sciences. Yet beyond accolades, what stands out is his passion for instilling a scientific temper in society, a belief that science is not merely the pursuit of knowledge, but a way of thinking, questioning, and engaging with the world. So Professor Dabolkar is currently director of Abdus Salam Center for the Theoretical Physics with the rank of Assistant Director General of UNESCO. The Scientific Advisory Board of the United Nations has helped in disseminating this talk worldwide, and we are very much thankful to them. So as we celebrate this National Science Day, let us draw inspiration from Professor Dabolkar's journey. His life reminds us that the science thrives not only in the laboratories and equations, but also in the courage and ask bold questions, the humility to seek answers, and the vision to share knowledge for the betterment of humanity. On behalf of the TIFR Alumni Association, I extend our warm welcome to Professor Dabolkar for his contributions, and to all of you for being part of the vibrant community that continues to uphold the values of inquiry and discovery. So with those few words, I now request Professor Dabolkar to give his talk. Thank you, sir.
Did I put it from inside? Okay, so it's a real pleasure for me to be here. So thank you very much to Arnab and also to the director of TIFR for giving me this opportunity. It's always very nice to come back to your roots. I spent more than 10 years at TIFR. So definitely I'm kind of consider myself a TIFR alumnus. So it's particularly nice that this is organized by the Alumni Association of TIFR. And as Prabhu mentioned, it's also the 100th centennial of Abdus Salam, who was the founding director of ICTP, a very renowned physicist who got a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1979. So this is the 100th year, and we have a number of events around the world, and it just happened coincidentally that it's taking place here. So it's really nice. It's going to be a difficult task for me, I have to say, because I have very distinguished scientists sitting here and the distinguished scientist of tomorrow sitting in the audience. So the future of science. So I will try to, I have to admit that it may be a little bit more towards the first set of people, but pay attention because I'm going to ask you questions later on. But I think I want to convey to you that, I mean, I remember when I was your age, I actually grew up in a small town in India. I studied till my 10th in Marathi science. And so I think the fact that you're keen on science is very important. So keep that flame in your mind. But I think some of the topics that we're going to discuss are also very equally important, as important as the science that you will study, is what is really scientific temper? What does it really mean to be a scientist? How do you think with a scientific attitude in your daily life? And that's equally important, and therefore pay attention. So maybe I will go on this side. So I've called it the age of unreason. There is a famous book written by Thomas Paine with this title, Age of Reason. Okay, Age of Reason. And it has this funny, being an investigation of true and fabulous theology. Okay, it was a book written in the 19th century. But this book really kind of is considered to be the one which kind of announced the scientific worldview, that observation and logic as a reliable source of knowledge rather than religious scriptures or traditions or what some authority might be telling you, to question. There is a wonderful essay by this famous philosopher Immanuel Kant, What is Enlightenment? Okay, so more broadly, I would like to talk about the ideals of enlightenment. And one of the ideals of enlightenment is sapere aude in Latin, which means dare to know, that dare to have the courage to think for yourself. Then there are also other ideals like individual liberty, tolerance for other people's ideas, also with whom we may not agree, because that's how we can actually have a scientific exchange. Separation of powers also in political world. So this really are what one would call the ideals of enlightenment. And then that has ushered in the last 300 years, this really spectacular and perhaps the most rich heritage of humankind, the heritage of science, starting with atom. So all of you have studied atom, maybe you know about an atom. Then a cell, that the fact that our body is made up of cells and there are DNAs and things like that sitting inside. Then planets, we really now understand the motion of planets. Things like black holes, this is what I do in my spare time or in my daily work. It's really now, this is a quantum computer, but really going from the quantum, which is now your generation will be dealing with quantum computers, to the cosmos. From the quantum to the cosmos, it's really, if you pause to think about it, it's really a spectacular achievement. After all, we were evolved from monkeys, and our brain had evolved to throw stones and pick up berries. The fact that this brain, human brain, with these amazing collaborations that we're able to build with thousands of scientists, is able to comprehend atom in such exquisite details. I mean, this is not, the current understanding of the atom is so precise and so amazing that everything that you can imagine from your phone. So this is really the age of science, not age of reason, but age of science, that these advances in basic science have led to a rich harvest of technologies, completely transforming our lives. So semiconductors, which are now in everybody's phone, lasers, antibiotics, we cannot even think of living without vaccines and antibiotics, computers. This is a rich harvest that has come just in the last 200 years. And this rapid, if you look at the history of how animals evolved, it's an extremely short time. At the same time, we live in the age of, so why am I talking about age of unreason? Because we live in this world where there are all kinds of conspiracy theories, disinformation, questions about vaccines. So we seem to be simultaneously living in an age of unreason. Paradoxically, it's paradoxical because we are actually using science every day, but then we switch somehow and start questioning why science is true. Is it true? What is the method of science? There are anti-science philosophies, alternative facts, anti-vaccine, the climate change denial, and its variants which are particular to India. So what I want to emphasize for the younger generation is that this is not an abstract discussion what we are going to do. For a while, I will launch into a somewhat theoretical discussion, just for you to understand what are the kinds of questions that are being posed of science, and how you, who are wanting to be scientists, should have an attitude to answer those questions. What attitude you should possess. Because it can really cause real harm in world, because if you don't believe in vaccines, you are jeopardizing not only yourself, but also your people near you. And this is a very nice quote of a famous evolutionary sociobiologist, one would say. The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions. Paleolithic means like from the Stone Age. Medieval institutions, like from the Middle Age. Like still we have nation state as our fundamental unit, which are basically entities which are going to war with each other, as you can see currently. And God-like technology. I mean, it's really God-like. If you think about it, that you're calling somebody on a phone thousands of years away, thousands of kilometers away, looking at their photo, you just take it for granted. But if you show this to somebody from 300 years ago, they will think that this is some crazy stuff, you know. So this is, and it is terrifically dangerous. So you need to be aware of this, because these are also the challenges your generation is going to face. And it is now approaching a point of crisis. So the purpose of my talk today is to explain why the scientific method remains our most precious tool. It is not perfect, but it is still our precious tool for meeting these kinds of global existential challenges. We urgently need to reassert the ideals of science while distinguishing valid criticisms of science. There are some valid criticisms of science that I will describe, from intemperate exaggerations. Because this is what we are going to experience, and your generation is going to experience. And the only way we can really approach it is combining science with an attitude of solidarity, which I will describe. So there is a crisis of trust in science. Why? Because science is seen as a handmaiden of elites and profit interests. This is one criticism. Science, some philosophers actually, it's become very fashionable to say that science is just a social construct. There is no objectivity to science. Okay, I will describe this in some detail. Science is Western. Science is not something Indian. It is not consistent with our Indian values. Science is already there in various scriptures, you know, whether it is from India, from elsewhere. These are the kinds of challenges to science. And there are other criticisms which should be taken into account. Elitism of science. There is postmodern philosophy, which I will describe. Post-colonial nativism and the idea of Swadeshi, that we should, and we have to understand what part is valid and what part is not valid. Chauvinism and fundamentalism. So scientific temper in India, this is not abstract philosophy, because an anti-science attitude is particularly damaging to grassroots movements, also in your daily life, who are actually engaged in a serious battle to bring the light of scientific inquiry into the darkness of superstition that still engulfs modern India. And I will give you some examples in a more concrete context. Now, scientific temper is the temper of a free man. This is the wonderful quote of our, from Jawaharlal Nehru. And he wrote in 1946 that my own interest in science arises naturally from the social consequences of science rather than science itself. And Nehru clearly understood the importance of science, which is why Tata Institute is one of the gifts of the vision of Nehru. But he was actually more broadly interested in science as a civilizational project. It was not only the scientists that he was interested in, that he really wanted, and that's why scientific temper was an important part of his thinking. And our constitution also considers it a fundamental duty of citizens to cultivate scientific temper, humanism, spirit of inquiry and reform. This is the Constitution of India. But at the same time, so I want to clarify, Constitution guarantees liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. So this has to be properly understood. We are not, science does not say, come to you. The government or the state should not come to you and say that what you worship. Okay, whether you feel good by putting the picture of your mother or carrying a copy of Gita or of Quran, that is not the function of our constitution. So it guarantees you a complete liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. There is scientific temper at the grassroots, and I want to describe this briefly. I will illustrate, some of the discussion will become too theoretical. So I thought that I will take a few examples from some concrete things that are happening in Maharashtra and also around the world. In particular, there was an anti-black magic act in Maharashtra and the work of the Andhashraddha Nirmulan Samiti, which I will explain to you, and you will understand that some of the criticisms that are leveled against science, how they are being addressed in a concrete way. And some of the people who work for Andhashraddha Nirmulan Samiti are here. And we need, I will argue, scientific activism to support and strengthen these efforts at all levels, including at the level of ICTP director and as a working scientist, as a teacher, as a student who may be wanting to. So let's now address these various criticisms. Elitism of science. The charge of elitism of science really deserves attention, and we should all take it seriously, we the practicing scientists, because corporate interests can compromise scientific integrity and public trust. And this is not abstract because, we only think of some paper that we are writing. But there are several examples known, like nicotine or glyphosate and the connection to cancer. And there are several examples where major corporations try to actually game the studies or try to force the scientists to, or essentially co-opted the scientists in some ways, some scientists, not all of them. Of course, there were other scientists who were not co-opted, and thankfully, because of the works of those, link was established. But there is a good reason for citizens to question, maybe. And this is, one philosopher of science has described this very nicely, technocratic politics and meritocratic ethics. Because if you have meritocracy without solidarity, without connecting it to the people, if scientists only demand elite privileges for themselves, without actually having a connect with the society, then this question is actually going to arise. आता मी इथे सगळ्यांना एक प्रश्न विचारतो, जे कोणी मराठीत बोलणारे इथे किती लोक आहेत की ज्यांना विज्ञानाविषयी मराठीमध्ये त्यांच्या मातृभाषेमध्ये चांगल्या रीतीने बोलता येईल? त्यांनी हात वर करा. आता एवढ्या मोठ्या 500 लोकांमध्ये फक्त किती लोक आहेत? 50 लोक आहेत. आणि आपण महाराष्ट्र सारख्या मोठ्या देशामध्ये आहोत जिथे 10 कोटी लोक मराठी बोलतात. आणि हाच प्रश्न मी किती लोकांना मराठीत बोलता येतं? अच्छा, कितने लोग मराठीत बोलता येतं पण मराठीमध्ये विज्ञान किती लोकांना समजतं? और कितने लोग हिंदी में विज्ञान के बारे में, विज्ञान की परिभाषा के बारे में बोल सकते हैं? अच्छी बात है. तो कुछ लोग हैं. So this is what you can call linguistic elitism, right? Isn't it surprising? We have been independent, 75 years have passed. We talk about connecting science with the people, but here in TIFR, we are not actually connected to the rest of the world in which we are embedded. But I want you to now, while we must question elite privileges on elitism of this kind, the big mistake is to question, it's a huge error to question elite expertise. Okay? Because nature is subtle. You saw some experiments with liquid nitrogen and all these things, right? How did you like it? It was cool, right? But you need to understand what is liquid nitrogen, how to make it. It's not something that you can just start doing, get up in the morning and make tea. No, it's not like that. You have to train for several years, right? It's like if I tell you, go and play one day T20 international tomorrow, right? You won't be able to do that. I mean, are you going to face somebody, a fast bowler coming at you at 160 kilometers an hour, right? It needs techniques. Yeah, tell me, you have something to say? No, you raised your hand. Aha, you're saying, okay, you're giving his thumbs up. He's giving thumbs up. So the point is that just like in cricket, there is a elitism of technique, elitism of expertise. But then how is it that people then suddenly just do? I mean, one of my doctor colleague friend said that, I really hate these Google doctors, You have something, then you go to Google, you do some research, you think that you know, and then you start telling the doctor what he should or he or she should do for you, right? This you have seen, because nowadays you can ask ChatGPT, you can ask Google, and you think that you know. But a doctor who has actually studied hundreds of cases, has actually done some dissections, studied the human body. So questioning the elite expertise is a big mistake. And this is what one of the problems. Correct. Correct.
Just questioning it is not wrong.
Yeah.
Check again.
Correct, correct. So the question is that, yes.
I think
No, questioning the fact that, yeah. Okay. So
hello, we will have this later. So let him continue with the lecture. We will have question answers later. Okay.
No. So I think let me paraphrase what he's saying. He's saying that it is correct to question correct to ask a question to an expert. This I would agree with you. There is completely nothing wrong if you go to a doctor and say that, well, I don't understand this, or I read this and I think this is not correct. But if the doctor says no, but based on some study that I have been doing for the last 3 years, and based on these other 50 cases, your information that you picked up on Google just yesterday is incomplete. Then one should have the humility to go back and say that, well, I thought that I had understood this, but here is a person who has spent most of his life doing this, and I better listen to it. So that is what I mean by you can question. We will take this later because we have a long way to go. Okay. We can discuss this later and privately. Okay. Sorry, this is not moving forward. So this is the kind of issue that we come across. My ignorance is as good as your knowledge. Okay, this is the kind of criticism that people say that, okay, I don't care, you may have studied physics for 20 years, but I know I have studied this popular book and my ignorance is as good as yours. Then there is a social context of science. Like all social activities, any activity, the practice of science is determined by economics and social conditions. And priorities of science would often be set by the dominant and economic and social interests. And there is an additional dimension in India of caste and colonial legacy, which we have to take into account. So one criticism of science, current science, is that there is a huge amount of colonial Euro-chauvinism. Science is actually a very Western concept, and it is really always portrayed from a Western point of view, not giving proper credit to the native traditions. And this is definitely true. There is a tendency to extol the Greek miracle as the pinnacle and the origin of civilization and culture. Okay, this is very common. If you look at the 19th century historians, they're always writing as though Greece is part of Europe. But Greece actually had more in common with Egypt and in Persia of the time. Euclid, for example, lived in Alexandria, which is in Egypt. So to say that Greek culture, if you read German philosophers like Nietzsche, they're very proud of Greece because they think of themselves as descendants of the Greek civilization. In fact, some historians have written very nicely. I have read, for example, even there were attempts in the early, even as late as the mid 20th century, to somehow depict that Ajanta beautiful paintings in India, they somehow were borrowed from Greece. And this criticism is very valid and we should take it seriously because there is no doubt a tendency to undermine, there was, the confidence of the colonies by giving a perspective that science and scientific ideas have arisen or high art has arisen only in the European civilization. Because science really is a common heritage, is a very precious common heritage and creation of all humankind. And I want to give you two very good examples. Euclid, you have everybody heard. Euclid is, you studied Euclid in school. Everybody studies Euclid in school, right? Geometry, you remember Pythagoras theorem. It all comes from Greece. How many of you have heard of Brahmagupta? Okay, quite a good number, but still not 100. Okay, how many of you have heard of Euclid? Almost everybody has heard about Euclid. But very few people have heard of Brahmagupta. And how many of you have heard of Al-Khwarizmi? So, 1/3, right? So why is this difference? What did Brahmagupta do? Brahmagupta invented this. He was a 7th century, one of the great mathematicians of humanity, on the same level as Euclid or Euler or Gauss, who came later, who invented the notion of a zero, okay? Now, what do you think? Zero is a big concept or not a big concept? Zero? Is it a difficult concept or a simple concept? Have you ever written numbers in Roman numerals, like XXII? Imagine you have to multiply 57 and 533 using Roman numerals. Can you do that in your head? Right? You cannot do that. But so entire whole computer industry depends on this notion of zero, okay? But actually Brahmagupta did something more than that. He actually gave zero a fundamental kind of an entity as an entity in algebra. And this whole notion of modern algebra, thinking of numbers as what is known as a field, is not possible unless zero is an element of this algebra. So this idea of introducing shunya as a number with rules of arithmetic, with how to add and subtract them, was fundamental. And this was foundational to modern mathematics. And why did this arise in Indian civilization is actually interesting, because if you look at the Buddhist civilization, Buddhist philosophy or Hindu philosophy of the time, shunya was a very natural concept, like make your mind shunya. You often read, shunyatva is a concept. So in our philosophy, we had assigned something to the notion of nothing, right? You're representing nothing with something. And this concept was not so common in the Western civilization. So you see a beautiful relation between science and philosophy that arises. Similarly, in the 9th century, all of you see these algebraic equations, right? And you know that if you take, if you have something x equal to x plus 5 is equal to 8, then you take the 5 on the other side, then you say that x is equal to 3. These manipulations were discovered by Al-Khwarizmi. And this founded the modern algebra and systematic algebraic manipulations. And the idea of an equation, a general equation, that's why, how many of you have heard the word algorithm? But do you know that it comes from the word Al-Khwarizmi? It's actually a distortion of Al-Khwarizmi's name. Al-Khwarizmi became algorithm. Or algebra is actually an Arabic word. Al-Jabr wal-Muqabla. That is the name of his book, which means restoration and completion. So in that book, he explained how to do these manipulations. Take this on that side, that on this side, and you solve an algebraic equation. So this gives you examples that both from 3 different civilizations, very major concepts came through, and therefore there is a need to rewrite history from a modern point of view. So now I will come to the intemperate criticisms. There is an unfortunate slip. So all these observations are correct, right? And we must accept. But there is an unfortunate slip towards what is called a fashionable nonsense of constructivism and relativism. Okay, I'm sorry for the school kids in this. I'm putting too many isms here, but please bear with me, okay? Questioning objectivity and universalism of science. And this is not happening in India. This is happening in fashionable cafes in Paris and in major universities like Columbia and Chicago, where you will hear very verbose writings, which are quite difficult to comprehend, but basically fundamentally questioning the objectivity and universalism. And so one of these ideas is scientific fact is a social construct. There is nothing like a scientific fact. It's all socially constructed. Scientists just sit together and they agree and they have a cultural, some kind of an understanding. And then they say that, okay, something is true. Okay. This point of view, you might think is not, but this point of view actually has been pushed a lot in certain circles. Bruno Latour is he's very well regarded philosopher. So he says that content of science is a social through and through. Content of science, okay, not the practice of science. And to such an extent that he gave this example, he wrote actually an essay when it was discovered that Pharaoh Ramses, somebody's mummy was discovered. And the scientists figured out that they had bacteria corresponding to tuberculosis. So they concluded that he must have died of tuberculosis. But Bruno Latour wrote an essay saying that this is ridiculous. How could the Pharaoh could have died thousands of years ago if tuberculosis was discovered only in 1882? Now, you are all laughing at it. But, there are people who are sitting in, big conferences and really debating this, seriously. So it gives you a pause. This is fashionable nonsense. Then science is culturally relative. This is also a fashion. Also in India, there is a precedent of that science is no less determined by society and culture than any other human effort. Okay? This is important. It is true that science is determined by society, but no less determined. This is an exaggeration. This is Ashish Nandi. And then he has quite polemical essays. When I was a student, there was a scientific temper was being discussed, and there was a one particular group of people published something about the scientific temper. Ashish Nandi wrote another counter argument. He said the counter argument of humanistic temper, and in which he had a lot of polemical things like that the ultimate logic of scientific temper is the vulgar contempt for the common man it exudes, etc., etc. Okay, very polemical. But the fundamental point is that humanism and science somehow is independent, right? He's basically saying, if you have scientific temper, you cannot have humanistic temper. But if you remember our constitution, it says that scientific temper and humanism, it goes together. And in fact, he's questioning the objectivity of science. But you see, if somebody threw a stone at him, he's going to hit him whether you like it or not, right? The stone is going to fall the same way described by Newton's laws of physics. So in fact, in sociology, there is even a strong program of science which aims to explain not only the practice of science, but also the content of science. So this is the dangerous slip that I was talking about. But starting with a reasonable criticism of science about its connection with probably corporate interests and so on, and cultural determinations, you come to this this ridiculous conclusion that even the content of science, like the laws of physics, are not independent. They are not objective. And this, I think your generation must resist, because otherwise we will get into this cultural relativism. So there is a very nice quote of a famous scientist. There may be some useful insight to begin by studying the sociology of mountaineers. But one would not say that Mount Everest is a social construct, right? You wouldn't say that Mount Everest was just an idea that was cooked up by the mountaineers. This is Steven Weinberg, who got the Nobel Prize together with Abdul Salam that we mentioned earlier. So Mount Everest is a reality we all believe in. Dinosaurs were discovered early, but we all believe that dinosaurs existed 65 million years ago. It's not that they suddenly came into existence when they were discovered. And there are some important books I would recommend to you. Mirananda has written a very important book, Prophets Facing Backwards. Fashionable Nonsense by Alain Sokal. Disenchanting India, Tyranny of Merit, about meritocracy that I talked about. Sorry, if somebody wants to take a photo, you can do it now. Now, let's come to the excesses of this criticism. Other excess would be, so we saw that science actually originated all over the world. And we should be justly proud of what what India has contributed and what different parts of the world have contributed, and not just European countries. But this should not sort of degenerate into Indo-chauvinism. There is an important task for serious scholarship to reassess history for an objective perspective. But we do ourselves a disservice by believing in some exaggerated claims about ancient science. Correcting Eurocentrism should not imply myth-making, and one should distinguish between mythology, poetry, and science. Some things could be mythologically true, something could be nice poetry, but that's not the same thing as saying that the scientific facts were known in that poetry. And philosophy. So what is true Swadeshi? True Swadeshi means it's a major task for all of us to reassess history, get rid of our colonial biases, but little would be gained by replacing Euro-chauvinism with Indo-chauvinism, or by pretentious concern for what is known as subalterns, the people who are underprivileged, by saying that their knowledge system is as good as the modern knowledge system. Because in a way that overlooks facts of nature. So we can actually take into account the local knowledge systems, which we should do, but we should subject it to the same scrutiny as we do to any scientific investigation. So I want to take you in another example. When there was an earthquake in 1934, I want to illustrate this to you, what scientific temper really means. When there was an earthquake in Bihar, 1934, Mahatma Gandhi actually made this statement. It is a divine chastisement for the sin of untouchability. Okay, now I have the highest regard for Mahatma Gandhi. He is our father of the nation, as Subhash Chandra Bose called him. But this statement does not stand scientific scrutiny, because what does science believe? Science believes that there should be naturalistic explanations for natural phenomena. Right? You cannot, you know that if earth shakes, that's what causes earthquakes, not some divine deity intervening. So, of course, Gandhi's motivations was to really provoke people to think about the sin of untouchability. But actually, there's an interesting exchange between him and Rabindranath Tagore. And Tagore actually questioned him. He said that, you are the Mahatma. And Gandhi was actually quite adamant about his views on this. But questioning even such revered voices is what is scientific temper. So scientific temper means not just taking what the authority is telling you, even if as great an authority as Gandhi, you should question. Now I want to describe some of these abstract discussions with what is known as the Maharashtra Black Magic Law. And the purpose of this law was to bring social awakening and awareness in society and to create a healthy and safe social environment with a view to protect the common people in society against the evil and sinister practices thriving on ignorance. Okay? And this law was passed in 2012 after 18 years of struggle, and there were many common criticisms. What is faith and what is superstition? This law is anti-Hindu, this law is anti-Swadeshi. So some of the topics that I described, this law is being proposed by agents of West. This is not Indian. Indian penal code is sufficient. And why do we need a separate law? And in this case, this Andhashraddha Nirmulana Samiti consulted several eminent jurists, Justice Dharmadhikar, Justice P.B. Sawant on the Supreme Court. He was the Chief Justice of Mumbai High Court. And the law covers areas that are not adequately covered by what is now known as the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, but that was the Indian Penal Code at that time. And so to avoid all this discussion, so I want to explain this to you concretely, that there is really nothing, none of these criticisms are actually true. to avoid all this philosophical discussion about what is faith, what is superstition, the law has a very specific schedule of practices. And it says that practice, propagation, and promotion of such acts is a cognizable and non-bailable offense. So cognizable means what? That if a robbery is happening, the police can intervene, right? They don't have to go and get a warrant. Otherwise, they have to get a warrant. But cognizable means that they can just take cognizance of that. They can notice it and act upon it. So if somebody is doing this kinds of fraud, they can, and they appointed vigilance officers. And the specific schedule is such that, and I want you to be aware of this, because we are here in Bombay in this prestigious institution where we are talking about black holes and Higgs boson. But just 20 kilometers from here, this law actually has applications. Claims of miracle surgery or cures without any medical basis, like doing surgery with just fingers. This is one of the practices. Claiming to influence the sex of a fetus. Discouraging or delaying medical treatment like snake bites, offering miracle remedies. These are some of the provisions of this law. Now, is this law useful? And actually, there are more than 2,000 cases registered. So it tells you the need for awakening scientific temper. Many godmen and women of all religions, it's not about religion, but it's about fraud. 20 cases of human sacrifice have been reported. So now you might think, we are in the 21st century India, can human sacrifice be an issue? But apparently it is an issue. And why do you do human sacrifice? Because again, something supernatural will help you to improve your financial condition, right? So this people are still believing, and this is what Nehru meant by scientific temper, that this is a civilizational project. Modern India needs an understanding of how the world works, not with miraculous properties. And in these cases, the provisions of Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita are actually not sufficient. For example, I'll just give you one example, but there are literally 2,000 examples, okay? To create an impression to be in possession of natural powers or nation of another person, thereby indulging into sexual activities, okay? But avatar of Krishna, there was one example of some person claiming to be an avatar of Krishna. Now, again, our constitution guarantees that you can have worship of Krishna. Nobody will tell you whether you should worship this god or that god. However, he defrauded a family claiming to be an avatar. So he basically cheated them with 9 lakhs. And he basically took advantage of both the wife and the young daughter by claiming to be an avatar of Krishna. And if you're an avatar of Krishna, nobody can question you. And this is not covered by our penal code, because what is the fraud, right? It's not like cheating you by telling you, selling you something which doesn't exist. This is at a level that is not covered by our penal code. There were other criticisms, for example, by respectable and serious commentators like Pratap Bhanu Mehta, who said that the law has a strong dose of legal paternalism. Apart from preventing harm that are already crimes, the purpose of the legislation is to protect people from their own beliefs. Now, it sounds reasonable criticism, but I think it's really based on an unfounded argument, and it's removed from ground reality. Why is that? Because consumer protection is something that we do. For example, if somebody gives you a medicine like for malaria and it is not tested, that company will go to jail or they will have to pay a big fine. So if you are allowing Food and Drug Administration to monitor drugs with strict legal protocols, the same should be, this is not regarded as some kind of interference by the state. Right? You're just trying to protect the citizens. Protection of citizens against unscrupulous and dangerous drugs is not to be regarded as paternalism. Okay? So this continues. ANISA at grassroots, they have held more than 1,000 programs to build awareness about this. Active implementation of law. There are 2 statewide Prabodhan Yatras. So this Prabodhan Yatra is to bring awareness about this law. And this is really voluntary contributions by thousands of people against all odds, against difficult, adverse conditions. So we should actually be grateful to them that they're helping to bring scientific temper in our society. And this is one example of scientific activism. Now I want to address some of the other criticisms that this law is anti-national and anti-Hindu, and scientific method is alien to the unique Indian gestalt. But you see, this really targets fraud and exploitation, not worship. It's not against religion, but against exploitation. And because our constitution protects right to worship. Because actually, if you look at our scriptures, Rigveda, there is this beautiful poetry in Rigveda, the Nasadiya Sukta. It's about somebody sitting there is wondering whence this creation has arisen. Perhaps it formed itself, or perhaps it did not. The one who looks down on it in the highest heaven, only he knows, or perhaps he knows not. So they are sort of saying that, okay, how did this universe come? So this is the kind of question that we are asking, right? Physicists of today. What is cosmology, right? How did this universe start? Like that's what you're reading in your books. It's the same question that was being asked in the Rigveda. And it's a wonderful piece of poetry. But one should not mistake this for a wonderful piece of science, because the level of cosmology that we have today is not contained in this very poetic Nasadiya Sukta. Is it also the Lokayata tradition of skepticism believes in rejection of God's soul, assertion of material basis of the mind. So this is also part of Hindu philosophy as much as the Rigveda is part of our philosophy. In fact, there are examples of importing pseudoscience. The item 6.9 of this law is offering miracle cures for snake bite. One popular figure used to offer the naja, which is a homeopathic drug, as a remedy for poisonous snake bite. Now, this is clearly very dangerous. If somebody has a poisonous snake bite and you give him some medicine which doesn't work, then it's going to possess. But in fact, if you think about it, he was actually saying that this is really some Swadeshi Ayurvedic principle. But homeopathy is really 19th century European pseudoscience, and you're importing that as something Swadeshi. So I would now like to switch the discussion to slightly more, just to explain to you what do we mean by scientific temper, right? What is a fact and what is a belief? Everybody has a belief. You have some belief that maybe tomorrow is going to rain, or today is not going to rain. So there is a very important notion in science which is to do with odds, right? How much are you willing to bet? Okay, how much are you willing to bet on something? Suppose you jump from a 10-story building. Are you willing to bet that you will not die? How many of you would like to bet that they are not going to die? So almost, maybe there is one person who will bet that they are not going to die. But 1 out of 1,000 people will say something like that no, nothing happens if you fall from the 10th floor, right? So that's very simple. So this is the idea of science. Basically, science is not some complicated philosophical. This is refining this common notion that we trust something as much evidence that we get. For example, if you find out that 999 people who take quinine are cured of malaria, and maybe one person doesn't get cured, then you say that I'm willing to bet 1:1,000 that he will get cured. But maybe for cancer, your confidence level is 70 to 100. So belief and evidence is very simple concept to understand if you think about it like that. As much belief as there is evidence, extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. Like if you say that there is a dancing monkey on the street, how many of you would believe in that? There is a dancing and singing monkey. Dancing monkey, maybe you can. But singing monkey, you will not. Normal monkey, you will say is possible, right? A monkey wearing a suit, okay, that's possible. But the monkey which is doing mathematics, you would not believe. So extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. There is another very major scientist, Richard Feynman, who has this nice quote. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. And my friend here, Sandeep, who actually worked with Feynman for some time, Feynman was a Nobel laureate and a major figure in physics. Because we know, all of us who, every morning we get up with some exciting ideas, and you think that it's a great idea. But by the end of the day, you have done some calculation and you realize that it was a stupid idea, right? So you have to learn to accept that you had a stupid idea, and you have to be very careful that you are not fooling yourself. you are the easiest person to fool. Okay. So now the notion of belief and fact is very clear. The difference between a belief and a fact is just a question of statistics. And this is something where science actually is misunderstood, because statistics is not something that we understand very naturally. See, we are not used to thinking statistically. Just because it is statistical doesn't mean that it is subjective or it depends on the person. It merely means that we are not absolutely certain, but only sufficiently certain. Just like I told you an example. If you jump from the 10th floor, maybe sometimes you don't die, right? So you're not 100% sure. But you would be really foolish to do something like that. It would be not a good thing to do. So there is an example of the Higgs boson. Okay, have you heard of Higgs boson? Everybody has. Everybody, nobody has. How many people have heard about the Higgs boson? Quite a few. So this Higgs boson, physicists had a belief that the Higgs boson must exist for almost 50 years, okay, based on lots of theoretical arguments. But this was not accepted as a fact of nature. It was not accepted as a real scientific fact for 50 years. And billions of dollars were spent. Thousands of scientists had to work hours and hours and hours. Why? Because they wanted to be sure, that they wanted to bet on the Higgs boson 1 to a million. Okay, that level of confidence they wanted. When the confidence level was 1 to a million, only then they agreed to say that the Higgs boson actually exists. Until that point, they did not believe in the reality of Higgs boson. So this is actually the event which detected the Higgs boson. So now facts and superstition is also very clear. With strong evidence in favor of a belief, we regard it as a fact, right? If you have a lot of evidence that quinine cures malaria, then we believe in it more and then it becomes a fact. If there is strong evidence against it and you still continue to believe in it, then it is a superstition. And this is a nice statement that everyone is entitled to their own beliefs, but not to their own facts, okay? Now, I will end by, I'm almost close to my talk. I will end by saying something about the fundamental duties of us as scientists. And I will go back to a very nice conversation between Gandhi and the first Director General of UNESCO, where I work, Julian Huxley, who was himself a major scientist, a biologist. So Julian Huxley was in the process of drafting the Bill of Rights, the rights, the UN Charter of Rights, human rights. So he approached many distinguished people around the world, and of course he approached Gandhi, who was not very easily reachable because he was traveling in the corners of India. And Gandhi would have considered it a big honor, to be part of this very eminent people. But Gandhi actually declined this, saying that. And his response was characteristically very original and very insightful. He said that in my conception, fundamental rights and fundamental duties cannot be separated. For every right, there is a corresponding duty. And this is, I think, something that is a message also for the scientific community, that we have the right to explore and the freedom to explore the way we want nature, but there is a corresponding duty to make this precious scientific knowledge globally and more broadly available. So that is our duty. We cannot simply say that society should support us to pursue science without also accepting this corresponding duty. Similarly, while scientists and technologists and all of us have the right to harness nature, there is a corresponding duty to conserve nature. And this actually is a very fundamental point. You see, if you look at the jurisprudence of Western democracies, and going back to people like Locke, you will see a mention of inalienable rights, which was an important concept, natural rights, that they are inherent in human beings. But if there is no corresponding discussion of your inalienable duties, there is this mismatch that happens, that you can harness nature, you can exploit nature as much as you want, without taking any corresponding responsibility for conserving nature. And the issues of climate change and all these things are related to this one-sided exploitation of nature. So I think I find it a very important message also for scientific community. And therefore, there is a need for scientific activism at multiple levels. with uncompromised commitment to the scientific method. And I really like your yellow T-shirt. What does it say in the back? Unapologetic. I think I like that phrase. Yeah. Okay, uncompromising and unapologetic. Uncompromising commitment to the scientific method and facts and evidence. I think we should not, just because somebody is putting pressure on you, say that this fact is not true if the fact is true. But we should acknowledge all the valid criticisms of science that have been raised. The question of the objectivity of science being compromised sometimes by corporate interests, things like that, all the limitations of science, and with a sense of solidarity with our citizens. And that really is what is meant by science with a humanistic approach, right? If the science becomes completely devoid of this concept of connection and solidarity and duty, then I think there is going to be reaction against science, because then it becomes just an elite privilege, and for which there is every reason to criticize it. So actually, there is a very nice quotes of in Prabuddha Bharat. This was a magazine that Ambedkar started. There are these very nice quotes. Be your own guide. Think for yourself. Okay, don't believe in what your teacher is telling you or what I am telling you. Take refuge in reason. Take refuge in truth. This is Gautam Buddha, and Dr. Ambedkar keenly recognized this, the role of science for social transformation, questioning orthodoxy to create a more equal and enlightened India. They're the ideals of enlightenment we talked about, and that's why he called Prabuddha Bharat. Prabuddha means enlightened. Now, last two slides, I want to tell you a bit about what ICTP, where I'm the director, is doing for science, okay? In a way, promoting scientific temper or science around the world. This is in a beautiful place in Italy, where we are joining forces to unite the world through science. And just to give you an idea, something like 200,000 scientists from all over the world, from countries which do not have access to science, have been to ICTP from 188 countries. And this has had an enormous impact in building scientific communities around the world. So it's not just a question of having scientific temper in India, but you also want to have scientific temper in Africa. If you want to change, if you want to deal with challenges like climate science, climate change, we are in it together. It's not that a cyclone will stop in Bengal. It will go to Bangladesh also. So we cannot say that I'm a Bangladeshi and I'm an Indian. And we need to understand and address these questions together. And so you need Bangladeshi climate scientists. And this is what you need, an awareness about science in Bangladesh. And this is what ICTP tries to do. So I will stop here. We are an international hub for science with a unique mission with the three pillars: excellence in science, so that to make the best of science available to everybody, but inclusion, making science globally available, and international cooperation through and for science. Once again, this is a very important role of science that we should not forget, especially as we see wars happening around the world. This is a language that we understand, all of us understand. Newton's laws are the same whether you are in China or in India or in the United States. The stone will fall in the same way whether you drop it in Mumbai or you drop it in London, following the laws of Newton. And therefore, it is possible to have a dialogue scientific among the scientists, because they can understand each other in a way that you say that music is a universal language or love is a universal language. I would say that science is also a universal language. And this is a nice quote of Abdus Salam, our founding director, that scientific thought and its creation is the common heritage and creation of all humankind. As we have seen, it is not that science was created in the West. Science has been created around the world. It is a common heritage. It belongs to all of us, and it was created by all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Adish Dabolkar, for such a wonderful and such an engaging talk. It is quite revealing. Due to lack of time, we can just take one or two questions if these are really pressing questions. Otherwise, Professor Dabolkar will be available after for the high tea. So, it's okay. First, we will take you. Can you?
take medicines. Like if everybody has like Google, like goes to Google for like the doctor equipment, but what if people start saying that why do we go to doctors if Google is there?
Yeah, so it may happen that one day Google actually becomes as good as a doctor, but if until that happens, it would be dangerous, right? Because you will ask Google, I have typhoid, and you don't take the right medicine, then that's a dangerous thing to do, right? So you're right that yeah, so people should not do that.
No, there is.
Well, sir, first of all, it was a wonderful talk. You actually gave us from a spectrum of things. So we understand that we must have a scientific temper at this time. So my question is most of us know that our human mind is actually, we have a scientific or the facts are there. At the same time, we have beliefs and the faiths and all these things also have constructed us as a human being. So, how much percentage of faith and belief should be there, and how much should be the fact things should be there?
Yeah, so as I said, I think if everybody needs belief, even scientists need beliefs. I mean, for example, the people who did the Higgs boson search, right? They believed in the Higgs boson, right? There was no fact of Higgs boson. So until you really, so it's normal to have belief, but you have to keep correcting your beliefs. When you get more evidence, if you found that there is no Higgs boson, then you say that from the next day that there is no Higgs boson. You change your belief. So changing your belief when in face of the evidence is what is scientific temper.
Okay, so I think let's thank the speaker for such a wonderful talk. And on behalf of TAA and TIFR, we really are very thankful to you for coming here for such a valuable time. And now I request all of you to join us for high tea. It is just outside in the Almond Grove. So please join us. And there is really very high